Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely, and with me today, again, is a former guest of The Gaggle, Vladimir Krsljanin, a politician, a diplomat, and formerly a special advisor to President Milošević. So, Vlada, welcome to The Gaggle. And obviously,
I'm very glad to be with you again.
Thank you. We want to talk about what's going on now in Kosovo, because suddenly things have taken a dramatic turn for the worse. And as always, when it comes to the coverage by Western media, it's full of lies and misrepresentations. And of course, they make the Serbs the villain of the piece. Everything is the fault of the Serbs. Everything is the fault of President Vučić. And particularly this latest events in Kosovo, which is entirely blamed on Serb terrorists and so on. So perhaps, Vlade, you could fill us in what's actually going on right now in Kosovo. How we got to this sudden dramatic escalation of situation?
Well, according to what President Vučić said yesterday evening in his last TV interview, he said, it is my guilt that I trusted the Western powers and put the country into kind of dependence on them. So it can be another step, another dimension of him approaching a new consciousness of the changed reality in the world. The previous step was in his UN UN General Assembly speech, where he very openly blamed the West for NATO aggression on Yugoslavia and its all possible violations of international law against Serbia and Serbian people. So on the other hand, in his politics, a very strong attempt to keep constructive relations with the Western countries is still present. It can be easily understood, having in mind circumstances in which this coalition came to power, and his party in particular, and especially in last 2 years of this dramatic conflict in Ukraine, where we have appeared in total NATO surroundings. So it is very hard for us now to breathe freely, to cooperate with the world based on the principles we believe in. So it is necessary all the time to make many compromises. So we are perhaps lucky that in this equilibristic politics, our president is
understandable. What about this latest incident? Now, the media have been reporting about this Serbian terrorist attack on a monastery, and Albin Kurti has been accusing Serbia of having orchestrated this terrorist attack. And again, we're getting this very one-sided coverage in the Western media. What's the truth? What really happened with this monastery attack?
I made this introduction deliberately so that people understand not only the essence of the event, where we still don't know all the details, but also to understand the mood in Serbia, because it is very important to understand the whole thing. According to what we have heard from trustworthy sources, including from the president himself, who is the only person who has all the information from Serbian security services and so on, we can reconstruct the events in the following way. In the village of Banska, which is by road 50 and by airline 15 kilometers from Serbian border, so it is not next to the border. In this very night of the event, a group, we still don't know the exact number of its members, it's like different estimates from 30 to 150 of armed Serbian men were building a barricade on the road. These barricades were secured by explosive built-in, so to keep them alive and to keep police forces of Pristina on distance. It's all in the night, so we don't know how it happened, why they made this barricade exactly in this village and not in some other. And we don't know how comes that Albanian policemen were also practically present during building the barricade. So a couple of them approached the barricade, and unfortunately one of them got in touch with this explosive installment, and he was killed by explosion. Another one was injured, and the third one, probably in panic, started shooting on some Serbs which were not far from him. And perhaps some of them died immediately from this first shooting, we don't know that. And then very quickly, within an hour, the whole village was surrounded by more than 600 members of Albanian special forces. So this opens another issue. It means that Serbian action was followed, closely followed. So there was kind of treason or leak of data, because without knowing in advance that they should surround that village in that night, it is theoretically impossible that 600 special forces appear within an hour in some village somewhere, you know. So these shootings were lasting, exchange of fire were lasting for several hours, and as a result, 3 Serbs were killed. A certain number, perhaps 6 of them, were injured, and about 10 of them, including the injured ones, were arrested. So that's it. But
do we know anything about who these people were who built the barricade, and who were they?
Well, it is more or less known. It's young patriotic people from this north of Kosovo, which is not historical part of Kosovo. I have to underline this fact. It was administratively added to Kosovo only in 60s. because of the communist rulers of that time thought that since within Kosovo there is imbalance, too many Albanians and not so many Serbs, so they added an area which was inhabited only by Serbs. So there was no Albanians there. So they administratively joined it to the autonomous province in order to make more balance in it. So these people are less willing than some other Serbs even to think about some common life, because in whole history until 50 years ago they were never part of anything connected with Albanians. So they want to remain in Serbia. So they don't want to see Albanian policemen at all, and not having the terror and arresting people arbitrarily and so on. That's what they do. But to understand why they did it, and of course their leader, a guy who publicly admitted in Serbia, and he was accused from Albanian sources since the beginning, Radojičić. He is kind of local tycoon. He's an entrepreneur, owner of a big constructive company, and a person of very fighting spirit. So he organized, financed, and armed these people.
To do with a view
that publicly.
To do what? What he organized, financed them to do what exactly?
To do resistance to the terror of Pristina Kurti's regime. So we have like several phases of the destiny of Serbs in the north of Kosovo. First phase was for about 12 years after the war. So it was a period where in the northern part of Kosovo, institutions of Serbia were active. So they were practically functioning as a part of Serbia, in spite that the world accepted the fact that they are part of Kosovo, whatever Kosovo is. Let's say in the terms of international law, it's a part of Serbian territory, which was temporarily put under the rule of United Nations administration until the final political solution. So in the agreement, the present authorities accepted in 2012-13 the famous Brussels agreement. Serbia agreed to close all their institutions in the north. And as a compensation, Pristina agreed to allow formation of the community of Serbian municipalities, so that Serbs remain kind of autonomy and guaranteed rights within Kosovo, whatever Kosovo finally is. But they are afraid of what's happening right now, you know. So
just on that agreement, did Serbia close those institutions down as part of that agreement?
Yes. Serbia fulfilled all its obligations according to Brussels agreement, and Pristina fulfilled almost nothing. Few smaller technical things, but the biggest part of the Brussels agreement, you can see it clearly from its text. It's like 2/3 of the whole text is about the community of Serbian municipalities, and we have no even trace of attempt to create it after 11 years. You know, so but before Kurti, previous regimes in Pristina were more moderate. They were not imposing their terror on the north. They were kind of, you know, waiting what to do, what not to do, and so on. But Kurti decided that he wouldn't respect anything, neither Serbian authorities, neither international obligations of Pristina, nothing at all. So he just sent everything he had, interventional police forces, special police forces, and so on, and started his terror. But I said there were 3 periods. One period is north with Serbian institution. Second period is period of asking for common language, postponing the obligations, but with moderate approach of Pristina authorities. And the third period is period of Kurti's terror. And that period started with a big, several months ago, crisis in Kosovo, when Serbs put barricades of all roads in the north. So it was a very, very serious crisis, and Vučić was talking about that these days as well.
And it was the case of the government. You know, they basically they boycotted the election, and then the Albanians essentially put their own people in charge, even though they were only about 10% of the population. That was the crisis.
Yeah, but that was a bit later.
Okay.
At the beginning, we had a blockade of the whole north with the barricades everywhere, and it was very a kind of atmosphere full of electricity and fear and so on, and under the big pressure of the West, in spite of the big dissatisfaction of Kosovo Serbs, Vučić practically, forced them to remove blockade and barricades. And the only compensation was the promise of Pristina, guaranteed by the Western powers, that the people who made barricades will not be prosecuted. But now, in the last weeks, in his wave of terror, Kurti started arresting these people whom the government from Pristina promised they would never be arrested. So that was the imminent reason why Serbs decided to make another step of self-organization and resistance. And this incident in Banska we started talking about was the first step towards that. But unfortunately, they were some kind of followed or spied, or some treason among them happened, because, you know, everywhere you have NATO forces, Western powers, their agents and so on. So it is not a big surprise that something like that happened, but it is very tragical thing, you know. 3 people were killed, and actually when Vučić proclaimed day of mourning in Serbia, he said it's for all who died, including Albanian policemen. He is also our citizen. So we are sorry for all, but of course for most of the people in Serbia, what touched their heart is that these 3 young guys have been killed. Actually, 2 of them were young. One was at the age of 50, and he had some experience. He fought in 99 in Serbian or Yugoslav army at that time against the NATO aggression.
But Vučić has been accused of moving his forces to the border, and the United States has said you've got to move your forces away from the border. What's the truth of all of that? And then Vučić said, well, no, I never moved the forces, and so on. So what's going on with this business with the forces?
The Vučić's latest explanation, he said, I now understood why they accused us that we increased the number of forces and the degree of their readiness, in spite it was not true, is the fact that we have sent there some more sophisticated weapons. That was something they were afraid of, because usually, he said before, in the moments of crisis, we were sending just some tanks and cannons and things like that. So and nobody was too much worried about that. So he didn't specify what kind of sophisticated weapons he sent there, perhaps some drones or whatever, some electronic equipments. So he believes that this made this false reaction of the West that we are increasing military presence, in spite we are not increasing. But on the other hand, the estimates is that where there were some critical moments where we had like 10,000-15,000 soldiers around Kosovo, we have them now about 4,000. So it's not that they don't exist, but their number is not increased. And 4,000 is also a number of KFOR in whole Kosovo. So we have some balance with that. In the case that we would have more than 4,000 there around, that would mean that that we have advantage, and that perhaps in some conflict we can beat not only new raising Kosovo army and police, but also KFOR if necessary. But of course, one of the main statements repeated by all Serbian politicians, including President Vučić, is we don't want any conflict with KFOR, we don't want any conflict with NATO, and actually the dream of Kurti with his terror is to show us in the Western eyes as kind of Russian supporters or prolonged arm of Russia, so that to put us in a new conflict with NATO.
Do you think that could happen? Another conflict with NATO?
Well, I am among those who believe that NATO cannot, doesn't want it. Actually, they were too much absorbed with Ukrainian conflict. So to start a new one it would be too much for them. Of course, for us as a small country, it would be perhaps even harder. But if it would be absolutely necessary, unavoidable, we are ready for that, and we believe in our success. But our present government would do everything possible, everything that has sense in order to avoid possible conflict.
Yes. But there's, of course, another conflict maybe brewing in Bosnia and Herzegovina with the constant threats against Milorad Dodik. I mean, as things stand, the office of the High Representative Schmidt, he's threatening to arrest Dodik. I mean, now, if they go ahead and arrest Dodik, that could easily provoke some kind of a conflict with NATO. I mean, how likely do you think that is to happen?
Well, what can we see right now? Not only right now, but in many months before, the intent of the West is to misuse Ukrainian conflict as a tool for increased pressure on Serbs, both in order to achieve the favorable for the West solution for Kosovo. So actually, their threat, their call that agreement needs to be reached until the end of this year, it is still valid. Nobody withdrew that demand, but it looks like more and more realistic that they will silently forget about it because of this escalation, and also because of the elections, early elections in Serbia, which will most probably take place on 17th of December. So it's in a couple of months. So it is not an atmosphere for such a solution. Similar pressure is put on Bosnian Serbs and Dodik in particular. But for them to go further, conditions there are even worse. Why? Because if they try to arrest Dodik or to violate vital interest of Republika Srpska guaranteed by Dayton Agreement, so if they do it, Republika Srpska can proclaim independence. They will probably then be recognized by Russia. And the same like Donbas republics, you know, Donetsk and Lugansk. They can be recognized one day, and very next day they can ask for Russian military support. So do they want to openly fight with Russians in the Balkans after this lasting fight in Ukraine? I doubt.
What would you say then?
It is very, very hard for us in all aspects, political, economic, whatever. But I still believe that that we have a chance to reach a better atmosphere in Europe and the world without further bigger losses.
But what would you say, Vlada, to the argument that NATO, which is clearly failing in Ukraine, the war is not going well for NATO, that NATO would like to distract the public's attention with what would be an easy win? I mean, they already defeated the Serbs in the 90s. They think they can do it again. And at least they'll have, hey, well, we did it again. We beat the Serbs. So what do you think about that? That might be a compensation for the failures in Ukraine.
that's an approach or a theory that I have heard already from several observers, but it is very logical, and as such, it can be realized only until certain extent. So that's what the West already does. But to go into open war with the perspective of Russian open involvement, I don't think they would risk to do that.
Do you really think Russia would get involved? Do you really think Russia would try to help Republika Srpska? I mean, they have no border. It's going to be quite difficult to provide any serious help to Republika Srpska. I mean, how do you do it? I mean, you'd have to go through the territory of several European NATO states. So I don't quite know how they would be able to provide material help to the Republika Srpska.
It is also a question for the NATO who threatens that, because actually, I mean, okay, Russian involvement in Syria, which also has no border with Russia, started earlier, but it still goes on. And we have many examples that Russia effectively helped some Latin American and African countries in the past, and so on and so forth. Okay, this is in Europe, and in that sense, it is more sensitive, it is more risky.
It is, because you have to cross NATO airspace.
For both sides. Mm-hmm. Russia already said many times that we do what we are forced to do. So I can't, from my point of view, I cannot imagine that if we are the only friends of Russia, full friends, okay, Russia still respects position of Orban in Hungary, of some other European countries, but they are at the same time NATO members who have sanctions against Russia. Maybe not full scale like others, but still. Serbia has no sanctions against Russia at all. So I cannot imagine a situation in which Serbia or Republic of Srpska, for most of Russians, it's the same, demands Russians military assistance, and Russia refuses to do that. So would they be ready to down couple of Bulgarian or Romanian planes on the road to Serbia? For them, it is nothing. If the West would risk nuclear war in order to down Dodik in Banja Luka, well, I doubt they would do that.
That's true, but Russia would still have to cross NATO airspace to get to Serbia or to the Republika Srpska. I mean, you'd have to cross Hungary, Romania, so does Russia really want to cross NATO airspace? I mean, Russia's been very cautious about not doing anything to provoke a direct war with NATO. That would provoke a direct war. You cross Hungarian airspace, that's it. That's NATO would call that a direct conflict with Russia.
Well, we can always look it from both other side as well. So you Western powers have attacked our ally, so we have to defend it.
Well, I'm all for it. I mean, I just wonder whether Russia would really take the risk. I hadn't really thought that Russia would want to do that. I mean, again, we remember back in the 90s when they provided no help to Serbia. Again, to have done so would have crossed NATO airspace. I mean, they would have had to, they would have had to go across Hungary, across Poland or whatever. So Russians didn't take that risk. So okay, it's a different time, but I hadn't really heard the argument you've just presented that Russia would be willing to take this risk on behalf of the Serbs. I mean, it's great news, but I haven't heard that argument.
Well, this is my estimate. You may believe me or not. How to say? I'm sure that Russia wouldn't like that to happen, but Russia is already a very responsible superpower, so they have to keep their credibility as well. So you just cannot, produce aggression on their allies and remain unpunished. It's hard for me to imagine.
What is the truth about the claim that Serbia has been providing arms to Ukraine? Is that true or not true?
Well, from time to time we hear admissions, even from Vučić himself. A few days ago or yesterday, I don't know exactly, too many events these days here, like always. By the way, he was putting, because there were many accusations that this group of Serbs in the north, this armed group, was supported by Serbia and trained and financed and so on. So he was denying that. And on the other hand, he said that most of the Kosovo Albanian special forces were armed with rifles produced in Serbia. And he said, do you think that we have sold them? How that appeared there, he said, I have no idea, but that's today's world. And he said, even more, these rifles are present in Ukraine. So he's another, I mean, of course, we are a small country, and I cannot completely support this attitude, because if that is true, which I believe is, then that it means that our country does not have full sovereignty, because which is also probably the truth, because okay, we had no sovereignty from 2000 to 2012. After this coalition came to power, we have restored some elements of sovereignty by developing economic and military cooperation with Russia and China. But we haven't restored our sovereignty fully. And we are still dependent on the West and even of NATO, which all Serbs hate, and so on. So in that sense, it means that Serbian special forces are unable to prevent black channels of selling our arms, for instance, to some arms dealer in Turkey. That's probably not the only example, but I know that there are some such examples. They were proven. So there are some arms dealer in Turkey buy arms in Serbia, put guarantee that it will be sent wherever, and then it was sent to Ukraine or to Pristina, and we can do nothing about that because we don't have enough sovereignty. If we would have full sovereignty, we would be able to prevent such things.
Yeah. So what's your forecast for in the near future? You think this crisis will calm down, or is this going to escalate? Do you have any sense of how this is going to go?
Well, if we know the West, and we know them very well, if they have some benefit from some crisis, and their psychology is such, when they face some problem, their first thought is whom we should confront with whom in order to solve that problem.
Yeah,
so that's how they act everywhere and all the time. Since they feel certain benefit from this escalation in Kosovo, I can say that it will probably further escalate in the coming days and weeks until certain extent, when they estimate that it would be too risky to go further. So one of the factors in these estimates would be amount of determination in Serbia. Unfortunately, we don't have enough determination right now. How to say, dominant approach is the one that it would be better to withdraw, and practically Vučić withdrew some of the forces after Western pressure from the Kosovo border. So it's a tendency at the moment, but I hope this tendency can be changed. There are important international events in the coming days. First, in Spain, there is this European political, how they call it, whatever,
Yeah.
Some
Yes.
form of discussion between full members of European community and those who are begging to enter.
Right.
He will face the main Western leaders there, so perhaps he would feel better how much brave he can be. And even more important, in the middle of October, 15th or 16th, I think, he goes to China on the summit of Belt and Road Initiative, and also with important bilateral, he said that 7 or 8 ministers will follow him there. And theoretically, it is possible, although it is not yet confirmed, that he might meet Putin there as well, because Putin will also be present on that summit. So perhaps after all these meetings, by the end of October, Serbia will hopefully be more brave than right now. At least I hope so, but we shall see.
But by being brave, like what would you like to see him do?
Well, I would like that Serbia does not act anymore in a way that the only way of living is to adopting to EU. So whatever EU, there is no life without EU. That's not true. Number one, we can live without EU, or we can live as constructively as associated member of EU. We don't have to be full member at all. And we have to say it to ourselves, finally, publicly, we give up.
Yeah.
Turkey will give up soon, and why should we go on when it has no perspective? They don't want to change their attitude towards Serbia. So why should we still back them? And another thing connected with Kosovo, we have to start seriously talking in the Security Council about the fact that KFOR, run by NATO and the US, does not respect 1244 resolution. Not only they don't respect it, they even violate it in some aspects. So a debate in the Security Council should be open about that.
Yeah.
So theoretically, we can achieve even the change of the UN peacekeepers in Kosovo.
Yeah.
So it is not written in the resolution that it should be run by NATO.
No.
And with the majority of NATO. It was adopted by a Kumanovo agreement, which was signed under the bombs.
Yeah.
So now we can see that they didn't fulfill their promises. They don't respect the highest level of international law, which is the UN Security Council resolutions adopted under Chapter 7. So there is no more important international obligation. Theoretically, doesn't exist anything more important than obligation created that way. So if the West does not respect that, then we have to debate how should we go on further. So first, I think that on 18th of October, we have scheduled this regular session, which is every half year with on Kosovo. So it would be very soon first possibility to reopen this issue in more serious way than before.
Yes. No, I mean, no question. In fact, that was the whole point of Resolution 1244. Unlike what Madeleine Albright had wanted at Rambouillet, which was that it would be a NATO force, the whole point of 1244 would be that it would be an international force. It's developed into this NATO force. And also under 1244, you weren't supposed to recognize the independence of Kosovo. There could be no final settlement until all the parties had been consulted. There, it's actually written in 1244 that there can be no unilateral decisions on the final status of Kosovo, which of course NATO violated, or most NATO member states, by recognizing Kosovo in 2008.
Absolutely, you're right.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Vladimir Krsljanin, thank you so much for this fascinating and very important and very informative discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George.
And welcome to the